So Germany is a trip. The Irish philosopher Edmund Burke taught us that those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. And the Bible teaches us, of course, that there's nothing new under the sun. And look what Germany has given us in the last 500 years. I mean, they're the gift that keeps on giving. They gave us the Protestant Reformation, right? And they gave us 2 world wars. And now we've got the German synodal process. So it's been reported, this thing's been going on for a couple of years. You've got some pretty liberal, I would say heretical bishops over there leading this process. And they just had some sort of conference last week where they're trying to get the church to change its teaching on marriage, same-sex unions, and women in the priesthood. And, you know, like Ronald Reagan said, here we go again, right? I mean, the church teaching is what it is. The church isn't a democracy, okay? It has authority of its own. And when it comes to matters of faith and morals, it can't change. It teaches what Christ taught. And he taught very clearly on these issues, right? He established a male priesthood. He taught very clearly on marriage between one man and one woman. And the church has always taught, and so has the Bible, that homosexuality is a sin. It's a disordered passion, just like a multitude of other sins. And just because the world embraces it now and you get a merit badge if you're, gay or transsexual or whatever, LBGTQ, whatever, doesn't mean that that's the morally right thing to do. This whole thing about love is love. Well, love isn't love. I mean, you can love perverted things, right? There are people who, John Wayne Gacy loved murder, right? I mean, these people, you can love things that aren't worthy of love. It's a disordered form of love. And homosexuality is a disordered passion. The church has taught that from the beginning. It's a sin just like any other. I mean, for heterosexual people, the church has always taught that sex outside of marriage is also a sin, right? So, and you're taught to abstain. If you're not in a committed marital relationship, you're supposed to abstain from sex. That's been church teaching from day one. Yeah, and the German synodal process, they want to bless same-sex marriages. Well, you can't bless sin. I mean, you can't bless sin. So, we'll see where this goes. So I wanted to talk a little bit in this video about heresy. And heresy is a false teaching. And when it comes to Christianity, it's the Catholic Church that gets to define what a heresy is. The Catholic Church is the church that Christ founded. So any form of Christianity, whether it's one of the multitude of Protestant sects out there, or if it's Jehovah's Witness, or any of these other heretical Christian denominations, they're basically taking a religion that wasn't theirs, that they didn't found, and saying they know better than what Christ knew, right? So they don't get to define what Christianity is, and they don't get to define what a heresy is. The church gets to do that. So let's look at the anatomy of a heresy. And I'll take 2 of the primary ones. Early in the church's history, in the late 3rd century, early 4th century, when the church was coming out of the apostolic age and the major persecutions from Rome, a cleric by the name of Arian came forward with a teaching essentially on the divinity of Christ, that Christ was not one and the same substance of God. And it became, the ensuing heresy has been titled Arianism. And it brewed in the church for 50 years. And when this teaching started brewing in the church and it came to the attention of his bishop, by all accounts, a holy guy, but like a lot of bishops, not just very loving and pastoral, empathetic. And he reached out to Arian. He's like, hey, that's a wrong teaching. You need to stop that. And he didn't. And he went off and brought more people from the church into his heresy, and it began to grow and grow and grow. And by the time that they went on for 50 years, ultimately they had the Council of Nicaea where they established the doctrine of the Trinity. And it wasn't the bishops who won the day there. It was a little desert monk, Athanasius, St. Athanasius, who did that. And he was a disciple of St. Anthony of the Desert. And this little desert community that had been off by itself is what saved the church. It wasn't the bishops. In fact, almost 80%, some estimates are almost 80% of the bishops were in favor or supported Arianism. But at the Council of Nicaea, behind the passionate advocacy of St. Athanasius, they voted overwhelmingly for the doctrine of the Trinity that we have today, our understanding of the Trinity. So let's jump forward another 1,200 years to the Protestant Reformation. And we had Martin Luther. And he came out with his doctrine on faith alone, in sola scriptura. And he also, the church reached out to him, and in fact, there was a trial, right? His doctrines of faith alone and sola scriptura actually came out in a series of debates he had, and the church reached out to him and said, hey, this is heretical teaching. It's a false teaching. You need to stop it. He didn't do it. Look where we're at today. Look what Protestantism is, right? They believe whatever they want now. It started with faith alone, sola scriptura, and now you've got 70,000 and change denominations, and they believe whatever they want. And so in both instances, you had a rogue cleric. In these two cases, at least, it's not always somebody from the inside the church that creates a heresy. I mean, look at Islam, right? But in both of those cases, you had the leadership of the church reach out to them, but pride and ego, and they knew better, and they just went off and did their thing anyway. And it created, big problems for the church. So we'll see what happens in this case. I mean, Pope Francis back in 2019 with this German synodal process got underway. He sent a letter to them cautioning them that, hey, the church doesn't work that way. One little rogue group can't go off and change doctrine and the church teaching. So we'll see where this thing goes. Pope John Paul II taught explicitly on women in the priesthood, and he said it is not permitted. And if you look at Pope Francis on these other issues, right, on same-sex marriage and on homosexuality, he's been very strong publicly on affirming church teaching here. But Pope Francis, he's a pastor. He gets a lot of flack for, these guys. It's funny. Anybody who's been in a big organization knows that it's not always the best or the most qualified or the most competent person that gets promoted. A lot of times it's people who just go along and they're peacemakers, they're good people, and they avoid problems, and organizations like that. They don't want firebrands underneath them, always challenging them and always pushing forward and trying to take things in a new direction. Those like St. Athanasius back in the 4th century, right? But there are times that type of leadership is important. So a lot of bishops, they don't have the fire in their belly for a fight. And man, they've never been that type of personality. They're managers. They just want to go along to get along. And if you look at Pope Francis, the guy was a pastor. He came up through a pastor. He wasn't a theologian, or he didn't spend his career in the Vatican being a diplomat and playing all this political stuff. The guy's pastoral. And he gets a lot of flack for kind of talking off the cuff and given the benefit of the doubt to people who are critical of the church or outsiders or even factions inside the church who aren't teaching church teaching. But how do we expect anything different from that? I mean, if you're a Catholic priest and you spend your career in a pastoral way like that, these guys are empathetic people, and they look at the best in people, and they want the best, and they don't want to create a fight. But he signaled, I think, pretty strongly that if Germany keeps going this way, he might exercise some authority. We can only hope. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I mean, look at Arianism. Arianism took 50 plus years to get resolved. And like I said, most of the leadership of their church went with them. Look at when Anglicanism was formed in England, right? When King Henry VIII says, I'm going to have my own church because the Pope won't let me divorce my wife. And he declared himself the head of the church, and he went to the church and he said, you people need to get in line, right? You need to swear an oath to me, the king. And most of them did. Most of the leadership of the church went Anglican, in the Church of England. And it happens. But look at the church. I mean, if we believe what Christ said, that the gates of hell will not prevail against the church, then it shouldn't matter. And we need to look at this thing with a long eye, right? With a long view. Everybody's so critical about what's happening now, what's happening now. This situation with Germany may not get resolved very quickly. Arianism took 50 years, and Protestantism, we're 500 years and growing. I mean, they're self-destructing. If you look, and we can learn from the Protestant church. They have been compromising on doctrine from the beginning. And once you do that, it's a slippery slope. And look at them. They are a house divided. And a house divided can't stand. So, you know, for me, my faith is in the Catholic Church. My faith is in the Holy Spirit. My faith is in Jesus Christ. He founded the Catholic Church. He said he was going to be with us till the end of the age. And I have every confidence he's going to do that. So what's our role as laymen? Our role is to love God and our neighbor and work on our own personal holiness, right? And try to be the light in our own circle of influence. That's all we can do. Try to call people to the truth in whatever way we're called to do that. But this wringing our hands over what Pope Francis is or isn't doing, or what he's saying or isn't saying, or how the German bishops are handling it or not, that's not our fight. Like I said, this is not, the church is not a democracy. We don't get a vote. I mean, they're trying to, Pope Francis in the synodal way is trying to make the church more, I guess, participatory of the laity. But we don't get a vote. At the end of the day, it's the Pope and the bishops who decide in the magisterium. And that's always been the way from the beginning, from apostolic times. So we need to work on our job, which is being the light of Christ in this world, and let the Pope and the bishops handle their responsibility, and let all the rest of it take care of itself. If more people did that, we'd be much better off. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I appreciate you watching. And until next time, siempre adelante.